So, gentlemen, one of the areas that as men we are very poor in and that we take for granted is what I call emotional literacy. And it causes us ongoing problems, both in our relationships and even in our lives, and how we are able to manage the problems that we inevitably encounter. Emotional literacy is a weakness that makes us get involved in bad habits, bad relationships, and inevitably leads us into a lot of trouble. So, today I'm going to be talking about the psychological roots of alcoholism and even gambling. Some guys have asked me to help them deal with the problem of gambling. Most of us feel we are bulletproof when we say we are social drinkers, but we do a lot of damage to ourselves and to our neurochemistry by occasionally taking alcohol. So it's important to understand exactly how alcohol rewires your neurology. So I'm going to talk about the psychological roots of taking alcohol and how you can escape the inner void. I have friends that I hope they're going to watch this video. You hang out with them, but you cannot take an hour before they say that they'd like to take a shot. And they think that is normal and they think that is okay. They think it's cool, actually. And the women that they are with also think that's okay, that's a good thing. But of course, inevitably at some point they have meltdowns that expose that these are guys who are dealing with serious psychological problems. So, to begin with, I like to say that alcoholism rarely begins with a drink. It begins with what the drink numbs. So psychologically, alcohol functions as an anesthetic for the soul. People often drink not to feel good, but to stop feeling bad. Gentlemen, if you're enjoying this video, take a quick moment to like, subscribe, and share. When you subscribe, you'll always get notified when I drop new content. And when you like and share, you help this channel to grow, and more importantly, you help other men to discover the tools that they need to level up. Remember, when one man rises, we all rise. Now let's get back to the video. And that's why I tell guys, just before you take the next drink, when you've already filled the bottle, ask yourself, what am I trying not to feel right now? So often, we have childhood trauma, we have shame, we have rejection, we have grief, we have even unprocessed anger that create an emotional backlog in our psyche. And most of the times, this is what is weighing you down. This is what makes you feel you'd like to have a drink. That is a pain that you're trying to numb. In a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, GABA says that addiction is not about pleasure. It is about pain. And addicts are not hedonists. They are escape artists, fleeing unbearable emotional realities. Alcohol temporarily soothes this internal chaos by suppressing activity in the amygdala. The amygdala is a part of the brain that handles fear and anxiety. It's a fear and anxiety center. Alcohol also stimulates dopamine. And dopamine handles both reward and motivation. Call it the feel-good hormone. The drinker normally experiences relief, calm, and fleeting confidence. But beneath that calm lies emotional repression. The pain never leaves. It merely hides, waiting for the next drink to silence it again. So let's look at the illusion of control and masculine shame. For men, especially the professionals, alcohol often disguises itself as a ritualized confidence. It offers a counterfeit version of masculinity. It makes you feel relaxed, fearless, and charming. But beneath all that lies insecurity, the fear of inadequacy and failure. Society teaches men to suppress vulnerability, and so they turn to substances instead of introspection. Carl Jung described this as the shadow's rebellion. And the shadow is a part of the mind that contains the rejected parts of the psyche. And they find expression through destructive habits. So the bottle becomes a portal to unacknowledged emotions. These are the emotions in your shadow, like shame, anger, fear, loneliness. All of them are leaking out under the influence. So let's look at the neurochemical prison. And here we are going to look at dopamine, GABA, and dependence. Let's look at the dopamine roller coaster to begin with. So alcohol stimulates the brain's dopaminergic reward system, releasing a surge of dopamine that temporarily elevates mood and confidence. But repeated drinking desensitizes dopamine receptors, meaning that over time, one must drink more to feel less. And this leads to tolerance, then dependence, and finally, anhedonia. Anhedonia is the inability to feel pressure from anything else. And what becomes as escape becomes enslavement. Very similar to how sugar can mess up our insulin and make us insulin resistant. It's the same way alcohol also works on our dopaminergic system. So in Dopamine Nation, Dr. Anna Lemke describes addiction as the relentless pursuit of pleasure despite the mounting pain. The brain's reward pathways recalibrate around the substance, creating a neurochemical dictatorship. Alcohol becomes the only way to feel normal. Some guys are pushed back saying, oh, our ancestors were not stupid to take alcohol. In the African society, people used to take alcohol to celebrate when great things happened or during occasions like circumcision, where there's a great harvest. Okay? Alcohol is not taken as a recreation. Nowadays, people look for excuses to take alcohol. You take alcohol because it's your birthday. You take alcohol because you've had a long week. Those are bullshit reasons for taking alcohol. One of the worst things that we have been taught is that you cannot celebrate without alcohol. That is one of the worst beliefs you can ever have. If you've made a good business deal, okay, if you've made money, you don't need to take alcohol to celebrate. The second thing we want to look at is the GABA trap. And the GABA stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. And this GABA is the brain's inhibitory neurotransmitter. It produces calm and lowers anxiety. Okay? But the brain compensates by reducing its own GABA production over time. So GABA is normally produced naturally in the body. But when you start taking alcohol, the body is inhibited from producing GABA. That means you cannot naturally feel calm. Okay? And so that means that the drinker must consume more alcohol just to function. And that's why if you don't take alcohol now and you're addicted, you start feeling anxiety attacks. You suffer from withdrawal symptoms. You start shaking. Basically, what you are suffering from is anxiety because you've messed up your GABA system. You cannot feel calm naturally. Now you have to introduce alcohol to feel calm. So when you stop taking alcohol, withdrawal hits like a storm. You feel tremors, you feel panic, you feel insomnia, and you start hallucinating. So the body begins to need alcohol to maintain equilibrium. Something that is just natural. Now you fuck it up with alcohol. Now alcohol becomes your chemical and aesthetic just to function. Let's look at the social and cultural dimension, which is the normalization of numbing. So let's look at the social reward loop. Our culture normally romanticizes alcohol, as I've mentioned. From champagne celebrations like whiskey-fueled networking, drinking becomes a ritual of belonging. For many men, especially professionals, refusing a drink can feel like social defiance. That's why you say you are a social drinker. And I normally tell guys, is this a playground? Why do you have to bow to social pressure? It's like there's peer pressure. If you don't drink, you can't be social. What does social drinker mean? The social structure reinforces this behavior through positive reinforcement. That is acceptance, laughter, and camaraderie. Meanwhile, emotional authenticity is penalized. It is easier to bond over beer than vulnerability. And what's the result of this? The result is collective avoidance. A culture that rewards escapism and punishes introspection. And then there's a shame spiral. Once addiction takes hold, shame becomes the dominant emotion. The alcoholic knows he's failing at work, at home, and even in health. But shame drives further drinking. That's why you find these fat guys with pot bellies, they're out of shape. They can only find solace in alcohol to put up with their failure, with their shame. Instead of acting on what is making them feel ashamed, they drown it in alcohol. Psychologists call this the addiction paradox. The very emotion caused by drinking becomes the reason to keep drinking. Shame destroys self-trust. The addict no longer believes he can recover. He becomes trapped in a self-reinforcing loop of failure and guilt. So they become fatter and fatter. They take more beer, more nyama choma. They take the blue pills to smash the hood rats that they pick in the clubs. So let's look at how alcohol destroys lives and the neurological and emotional degeneration. Long-term alcohol consumption destroys and shrinks the prefrontal cortex. And this impairs decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. The person becomes more impulsive, erratic, and reactive. Most men who commit suicide are men who are taking alcohol. Alcohol creates a depressive mental state. It also makes you impulsive, as I've indicated, very erratic and reactive. Small things make you get very pissed off, and they drive you off center. You can't handle small things. You become more emotional like a woman. Being an alcoholic is like being fat. Okay? Become very emotional. Too much estrogen. But alcohol, of course, is because your neurological pathways are fucked up. So emotionally, alcohol arrests maturity. And that's why you should not have young people taking this. Below 25, alcohol is dangerous for you. You will remain stuck at the emotional age when drinking began. Relationships crumble because emotional sobriety never develops. And most guys who come to me with relationship problems, they are also people who drink. Because alcohol also, it doesn't mean that if you don't take alcohol, your relationship will not fail. They'll fail, but you'll be able to navigate them much more easily, and you'll actually see it coming. But alcohol is going to numb you. You're going to be blindsided. And when it happens, you cannot deal with it because you're emotional, you are reactive, you're panicking. Okay? So we have to remember that alcohol basically makes us beta males. It makes you weak, it drives you from your purpose, and it also reduces your sexual marketplace value. Alcohol also makes you lose your mission and identity because it erodes the masculine virtues of focus, purpose, and resilience. You become weak. The man who once had a vision becomes unreliable, forgetful, and ashamed. Most guys who take alcohol are not reliable. His masculine polarity collapses. No woman respects a man who is ruled by the bottle. And most of these guys who say happy wife, happy life, most of them are guys who take alcohol. They become betadized. The professional becomes mediocre. The father becomes absent. And the lover becomes numb. Alcohol also destroys your social capital. As drinking worsens, the mind isolates. Trust is lost, friendships dissolve, and opportunities vanish. And in many cases, it's not the alcohol itself that ruins him. It is the compounding consequences of lost trust. So how do you escape the vicious cycle? What's the path to recovery? The first thing is radical honesty and ownership. Recovery begins with the truth, not just admitting addiction, but confronting what the alcohol is protecting you from. Until the pain beneath the addiction is faced, sobriety will feel like starvation. GABA mate notes that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. The second thing you have to do is to rebuild dopamine discipline. To heal the brain, you must rebuild tolerance for natural rewards. So things like exercise, purpose, creativity, masculine camaraderie, and solitude. Those are things you have to rebuild. This process is going to rewire your dopamine pathways towards intrinsic fulfillment rather than external highs. The third thing you need is brotherhood and accountability. No man escapes addiction alone. So in Jungian terms, addiction is a shadow's victory. And confronting it requires mirrors, not isolation. So support groups, men's circles, or therapy with trauma-informed professionals, they help restore accountability and masculine structure. Those of you who have read Unplugged, if you want to join our group, you can let me know in the comments. The fourth thing you have to do is you have to develop purpose and spiritual integration. So recovery is not just abstinence. It is transformation. And the addict must replace the void with mission. Remember that human beings can endure anything, as we learned from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Anything. So if you have a purpose, you can actually endure anything. Sobriety without purpose is punishment. Sobriety with purpose is liberation. So in closing, gentlemen, alcohol is not just a drink. It is a metaphor for modern man's disconnection from meaning. It numbs the ache of a life unlived. It silences the inner voice, calling him towards greatness. It gives temporary peace, but at the cost of eternal restlessness. And so to break free, a man must trade intoxication for introspection. He must trade pleasure for purpose. And he must trade shame for sovereignty. The bottle is not the enemy. Avoidance is. At the cure of it, it lies not in willpower, but in reconnection. And this is reconnection to the self, to the truth, and to your mission. So get unplugged, and I'll see you on the next one.